everyone, Midit's here. I guess it's finally time to talk about this movie. In 2017, the fourth live-action Diary of a Wimpy Kid film, The Long Haul, was released, and the world hasn't been the same since. It's an adaptation of the ninth book in the series, which has the same title. Since it was released 5 years after the previous entry, the decision was made for this film to be a reboot with an entirely new cast of characters. Now, before we get in too deep, let me just say that I hope you enjoyed this video, and let's get straight into this. Now, I'm going to defend the decision to recast all the main characters. Zachary Gordon and a lot of the other child actors were way too old to come back, unless a completely original concept was made, taking place after Greg graduated. While imagining a movie with that premise is cool, this is a film about the long haul, and it would be weird if some members of the cast were replaced and others weren't. It would also make the comparisons to the previous movies even more common. So I don't dislike the decision in concept, but in terms of execution, I don't think it's the fault of the actors, because I rarely believe that actors are at fault for how characters turn out, and I honestly don't know if the original cast could save this writing. Speaking of writing, let's talk about the story. We begin at Corny's, a restaurant introduced in the 7th book, The Third Wheel. The driving force of the narrative is introduced as the Heffleys are going on a road trip to head to Meemaw's 90th birthday. It makes sense not to have the Heffleys aimlessly driving around like in the book, especially if you ignore the fact that the Hard Luck book stated Meemaw had died. Manny is stuck inside a playground, and while Greg attempts to help him, he is recorded finding a diaper inside a ball pit. This then becomes the meme Diaper Hands. I love Diary of a Wimpy Kid, Roderick Rules, and that also had a social media storyline, but there are some differences between the two. First, the internet storyline in Roderick Rules was pretty minor, and with the changes in social media over the years, it feels more like a product of its time. I don't think Diaper Hands ever aged poorly, because that would imply it was relevant when the film first came out. This has probably been said countless times, but this feels like a meme straight out of 2012, and this will be something that will be brought up repeatedly across the movie. Also, Rowley is in this. Barely, but he is. Another thing we learned before the trip is that Greg is a fan of a YouTuber named Mac Digby, and hopes to find a way to attend Player Expo, a gaming convention he'll be at. This movie goes out of its way to connect itself to pop culture, and it's definitely to its detriment. It tries to seem more with the times, but it ends up just aging terribly. Anyway, some minor stuff happens, then we reach the hotel where we're introduced to the Beardos. Since I talked about it in my book review, I won't go over it too much, but let me once again reiterate just how cartoonishly immoral these characters are written to be across the movie. Greg sees the kids messing around with a cart of cleaning supplies and tries to stop them. The kids then throw the cart at Greg, it misses him, and instead hits the Beardo's car. Mr. Beardo then walks out, and his kids blame it on Greg. Greg later that night accidentally walks into and sleeps in the Beardo's room. The Heffleys head to a county fair, and here's when they get the pig. Mr. Beardo notices that Greg is there and chases him onto a Gravitron ride, which, compared to what happened before, is a huge escalation. Mr. Beardo tries to reach Greg, but he puts his hand on Roderick, who ate a bit too much before the ride. After they almost get into a car accident, which is the usual in the story, Greg changes the GPS route to Player Expo when Susan and Frank are away. While I'm not a big fan of the gaming convention storyline, this is one moment in the movie that feels pretty in character with classic Greg. He does this completely to his benefit, ignoring the potential consequences. The pig is dropped off at the petting zoo, and the next day, both Greg and Roger go to the convention. Greg sees Mac Digby, and as you can assume, Murphy's Law kicks in and everything goes wrong. There's a long line to meet him, so Greg decides to walk on stage and have Roderick record him so that it looks like they're doing a collab together. Greg jumps when Mac notices him, and this leads to him unplugging the game Mac was playing. Susan then arrives after seeing Greg and Roderick being interviewed on TV, and as she's taking Greg away, everyone realizes that Greg is the same kid from the Diaper Hands meme and starts chanting his name. I haven't gotten the chance to mention this, but Susan acts pretty mean. There's one moment where she almost hits Greg with a car, and she gets mad at Greg for almost waking up Manny. There's another moment, which is comically bad, where Greg has to pee in a water bottle, and Susan just starts making fun of him. It feels super out of character, and while we all know that the characters in this series are flawed people, some of these examples are just too over the top for them to be likable in any sense. While driving, their stuff begins flying out of the boat they brought for extra storage space. The Beardos, like the 1960s comic book villains they are, show up and begin stealing their belongings. The Beardos are just flat out committing a crime, so it's probably for the best that the film doesn't try to follow the book's ending one-to-one. The Heffleys then proceed to have a successful car accident after the whole seagull incident. I'm not going into it, just watch my other long haul video. After thinking that they've been shot, once again, let's keep moving forward, the Heffleys notice the Beardo's car in the parking lot of a motel. They break in and start using their stuff, which is actually kind of justified now in this version of events. Instead of Frank almost being left behind, Mr. Beardo finds Greg in the bathroom, but Greg manages to escape. After a little bit of driving, the car breaks down, but they conveniently happen to stop right before a hill that leads to Meemaw's house. Now, listen to what I'm about to say to you. The Heffleys push the car down the hill and then get inside, but Greg is left behind, so he jumps into the boat instead. The boat then ends up getting detached from the car, so Greg has to try and steer the thing. The boat then goes into a stack of hay bales, which it uses as a makeshift ramp, launching Greg into Meemaw's pool. This is a Diary of a Wimpy Kid movie. Anyway, they attend the rest of the party, and when returning home, the car breaks down again. The man shows up to help, but he seems to only speak Spanish. Manny then proceeds to speak fluent Spanish, thanks to Susan's Spanish CDs, and at this point, this is the most normal moment in the film. Manny tells the man to head to the petting zoo, where they dropped off the pig, so the pig's now part of the Heffley household. After arriving home, Greg talks about how they might be going on another vacation soon, with Susan adding that they'll be flying. I'm not completely sure if this is the case, but was that a teaser for an adaptation of The Getaway? Imagine if the first live-action movie had a scene teasing Roderick as the next main antagonist like he's Thanos. Speaking of which, there is an actual post-credit scene. We are shown Roderick's van as if it were a Marvel character, and Greg learns to be proud of Diaper Hands after two girls take pictures with him. It's genuinely impressive how this film manages to remove nearly all of the parts I enjoyed about the Long Haul book. That book isn't as great as what came before, but there were some elements left that still felt like classic Wimpy Kid. Every character feels off in this. Greg feels way too nice, and the only time he actively advances the story is when he changes the GPS to the gaming convention. Susan is unhinged in this movie, and I'm still wondering all these years later what they were trying to do with her character. Frank is super boring and doesn't do anything of note. Roderick has never been the sharpest tool in the shed, despite some smart moments he's had, but he's so incredibly dumb in this film that removes all nuance regarding the character. Manny is the same as in the book, which is exceedingly unrealistic in some instances, practically to the point of parody. Let me restate this. I don't think it's the fault of any of the actors. The writers just desperately needed to go back into the drawing board with the entire script. One thing that made Diary of a Wimpy Kid one of the best-selling book series of all time is that, despite having some potential dating references, the books felt timeless. You could read one entry in the series in 2025 or 2007, and it would still make sense. This film is filled with aspects of early to mid 2010s internet culture that were already phasing out by the time it was released. I can understand memes and YouTube culture from back then, but will people who try to watch this movie in the future be able to do that? Another addition made to the detriment of this film is just how wacky everything is. While the events of The Long Haul would be tame compared to current standards, the most recent Wimpy Kid book at the time was Double Down. While it wasn't a great book, it still felt way more grounded. I guess Jeff Kinney might have been inspired by The Getaway, which he would have been working on at the time, and it definitely falls more in line with what The Long Haul does. It's also a shame that the Beardos are bad people in this. The whole plot point in the book of the Heffleys breaking into their motel thinking they stole their stuff, just for it not to be true, is part of what saves the Long Haul book for me. There's very little I can say about this movie that is redeemable. I haven't made a ton of comparisons between this movie and the original trilogy so far, because it just feels kind of unnecessary. Yes, the first three movies do everything better in comparison to The Long Haul. There isn't much left to say. I guess for the exception of one thing, while it's not the entire reason, I do think part of the problem is just that The Long Haul isn't as great as the first four books that were adapted, and it especially doesn't fit as well into a movie format. Not to say that a good adaptation of The Long Haul is impossible, but more so that some issues this movie has are things that originated in the book. Now, I've been going non-stop ragging on this movie, so this may surprise you. This isn't my least favorite Diary of a Wimpy Kid film. I guess this is one of the few things I can say about this movie that is in the realm of positivity. I think the animated Roderick Rules adaptation is equal to The Long Haul, but the first animated movie is worse. While The Long Haul is the perfect failure, it's a failure because it tried to accomplish something, but wasn't able to achieve it at all. Diary of a Wimpy Kid 2021 feels so devoid of emotion that it doesn't fail at anything. because that would mean it tried to succeed in the first place. The Long Haul is at least bad in a fun way at some points, but the animated Wimpy Kid movie is just plain boring. I guess I could make a video in the future talking about these three films, but even with the improvements, they are kind of boring. Getting back to The Long Haul, it feels like a symptom of a larger problem I've addressed before with Wimpy Kid. The characters have lost a lot of what makes them special, the series feels like it's out of ideas, and is doing more absurd things to stay interesting, and it's noticeably not the same series anymore. It's a shame because I still love Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and I believe Jeff Kinney is still fully capable of writing something incredible, as there are still recognizable bits and pieces in his newer work. Who knows? Maybe one day Jeff Kinney will write a final book in the series that acts as a worthy send-off. Or Disney decides to create a sort of reunion movie with the original cast. Either way, I hope for the best in Diary of a Wimpy Kid's future, because it is a series that has done more than enough to deserve it. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out some of my other content. If you really did, subscribe so that you know when future content comes out. I have a Patreon, so check that out if you want to support me and see my videos ad-free. That's going to be it for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care!